It's been a hard day's night, and I've been walking like a dog.
Are you ready to get down to business? Join seasoned entrepreneur, community leader, and Army veteran Scott Shalom Klein, who will take you behind the scenes with those who work in America's small business scene and speak with leaders making an impact, creating jobs, and telling their story in entrepreneurship. So let's get down to business. On AM 560, The Answer, here's your host, Shalom Klein.
And indeed, we're all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship and business. We talk a lot about business here on with Get Down to Business. I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts on my website at syklein.com. While you're there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week. I'm thrilled to kick it off with the one and only Todd Davis, who has been with Franklin Covey and has created a new course, Navigating Difficult Conversations, Turning Tension into Progress, which addresses the top challenge in difficult conversations, the emotional tension. It's truly an important topic right now, frankly, now more than ever. Todd has been a senior consultant and thought leader and has over 35 years of experience in human resources, talent development, and executive recruiting. And once again, thrilled to invite Todd Davis onto the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Shalom. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I know you've co-authored many best-selling books, and we'll sort of dive in with a little bit of your background. This is an important topic and an important time. What was it that initiated the fascination with this topic of these difficult conversations that we know we all have?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I've been with Franklin Covey for 28 years now, going on 29 years. 18 of those years, up until about a year ago, I was on their executive team as Franklin Covey's chief people officer. And so feel like I got my PhD in navigating difficult conversations because that was a large part of the role. And so the company, I didn't, but the company created a work session, our newest work session, as you mentioned, Navigating Difficult Conversations. And while no one looks forward to these, there are actually tools and a process to put together the conversation and think through logically how you can handle the conversation so that it has the greatest impact in a positive way, and both parties come out feeling heard and making some progress. And so it was just because of my background that I'm so passionate about this and helping others handle these very important conversations.
Absolutely. So important indeed. And that background and your experience certainly lends itself well to this topic. So I know, again, this course, Navigating Difficult Conversations, Turning Tension into Progress, again, is addressing the top challenges in difficult conversations. Todd, are the difficult conversations getting more difficult, and sort of why now?
Yeah, I think they've always been difficult, but to your point, I think certainly more difficult than ever. I mean, certainly here in the U.S. and around the world, just people's fuses are shorter. People are quicker to be defensive or to react, and so I think it's always been very important, but now so more than ever before. And I think that brings up the first principle that I always like to begin with when coaching others is to begin with this concept or this principle of empathy. And if we have a mindset of putting ourselves in the position of the other person, not that we're agreeing or disagreeing, but that we can really look at things from their perspective. The common mindset when we're thinking of difficult conversations is to just think, hey, this is going to hurt no matter what, so the best I can do is minimize the pain. And while that's natural, we advise to have a more effective mindset that realizing I can reduce the pain and actually make progress when I focus on balancing my needs and the other person's. So we start with this balance of courage and consideration.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've read as mentioned, many things that you've written before, is that difficult conversations can actually help you build more effective teams. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, you think back on maybe some difficult conversations you've had with peers or colleagues or leaders, and when handled correctly, the trust that can be built. And so if we can start with this level of trust and know that our intent is only to help people get better, then we can say even the tough things. And so as I mentioned, the difficult conversations are difficult because there is something at stake. And whenever there's something at stake, emotions are high. If I've got a member of my team that's not performing like they should, well, then their reputation is at stake, and my reputation, the performance of my team is at stake. Maybe something else is at stake for me is how our relationship is going to be after we have the conversation. I'm concerned about that. And so all these things are at stake. It's why it's important to really identify, okay, what do I need out of this conversation and what do they need? And most important of all, if it's a performance discussion, they need to feel respected. They need to feel valued. And so we got to be careful about balancing this courage and consideration. And we advise, and in the course we talk about creating a purpose statement and a positive impact statement right up front. So it begins something like, Shalom, I really appreciate your time. I got to talk about some difficult things here, but I want you to know my only intent is to help you be wildly successful in your role. So that's a purpose and an intent statement. And if we can begin the conversation that way, it doesn't make all the challenges of the conversation go away, but it gets us off on the right foot.
Absolutely. I'm chatting with Todd Davis, again, a Franklin Covey human resources and development expert. And Todd, are there any common challenges that you see based on your research that are faced in difficult conversations? And of course, any straightforward solutions that can help us address those challenges?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, most of my time in the 18 years as chief people officer were performance issues. Someone was not, meeting the expectations of their leader or of the team, and so it was a performance issue. But more and more in this day and age, where there are so many ways to offend and be offended, it's really a lot of conversations around sensitivity in the workplace, being mindful of people's backgrounds, being mindful of certainly we're doing better. Companies in general are doing better on diversity, but what about inclusion? It's one thing, as somebody said to me the other day, it's one thing to be invited to the party. It's another thing to be asked to dance. And so we're great. Organizations are making huge progress on this diversity aspect, not just gender and race diversity, but all bringing people to the table of all different backgrounds. But how inclusive are we being? And so I think inclusion is something that comes to mind when you ask that question about coaching and talking with others about being more inclusive and really valuing the differences that others bring.
True. And, so often people come in with a mindset of fear in some of these conversations, things that will, again, intimidate you from even beginning a conversation that, as we've already said over the past few minutes, really can help you build more effective teams, can help you accomplish, again, your personal, your professional goals, because frankly, difficult conversations take place on both sides of things. But how do you change your mindset and allow you to enter into those conversations?
Yeah, our brains are interesting, aren't they? When we're feeling anxious or concerned, then they go into this fight or flight mode.
Sure.
And with conversations, I've seen a lot of really good leaders unintentionally just avoid the conversation, hoping maybe the situation will resolve itself or it'll go away. And that's actually the worst thing we can do. We're concerned about holding the conversation because we're concerned, of course, about the outcome. And our brains, while wired to go into this fight or flight mode, they're also amazingly adaptable. And when there's a pattern or a process they can follow, they adapt to that very quickly. And so if we can walk through, literally writing out, how am I going to begin this conversation? Am I taking into consideration what the other person needs as well as what I need, and have that structure, then we can feel a little more prepared to initiate the conversation. Something else we teach is once the conversation starts, we got to be prepared for different emotions that come up because it's unpredictable. We don't know how the other person is going to respond. And so there are three critical tools that we coach and use, and that is to pause, to observe, and to ask. In other words, pause, don't panic. It's just fine to take some time and say, gosh, let me think about that for a minute. To observe and not judge, and then to ask and not to assume. And if we can have an open, collaborative, respectful conversation and remember to pause when needed, to observe, to always go back to balance of courage and consideration several times during the conversation, we can actually make progress in these conversations and get to the heart of the issue and get it resolved.
Absolutely. So we're coming to a conclusion in our conversation over here, and I do want to make sure that our listeners can find out more, again, about this new course from Franklin Covey, Navigating Difficult Conversations, Turning Tension into Progress, and of course, get in touch with you and your team. What can you leave us as some final notes?
Final notes, don't procrastinate. Don't put off the conversation. I have learned the hard way that is the least considerate thing you can do. Even when you're hesitant to have it because you don't want to offend or hurt the other person's feelings, have the conversation. Figure out what you're going to say. Make sure your intent is declared, that you're letting the person know, the sincerity of your intent is to help the situation or help things get better. People can learn more about that by going to franklincovey.com. It all starts with empathy. It all starts, and I think the entire world right now would be in a much better place if we could not agree or disagree, but really try and see things through the lens of other people.
Oh, that's powerful words coming from Todd Davis again. Todd, your wealth of knowledge and experience from your decades of time in of course, Franklin Covey and human resources and all things talent management and executive recruiting certainly lends itself well to this. I know you've got some other books, Get Better, 15 Proven Practices to Build Effective Relationships at Work. And everyone deserves a great manager. I look forward to having you back on real soon. Todd Davis, thanks so much for joining us. Quick break. We'll be right back and get down to business.